All right. Hi, Leah. How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you doing?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'm looking at your bio. First words, Feisty Latina. Is that how you
Mm-hmm.
describe yourself?
I would. So I am a smattering of different nationalities thanks to my mother. She was born in Canada, but she's Irish, Swedish, French, native. But my father's from Bolivia, and that's the culture that I definitely um, feel closest to the most. I've been to Bolivia about 6 times, and yeah, so I feel like I'm closest to that culture, and so I'm a Latina. That's how I describe myself, and I'm pretty feisty. I know what I want, and I'm determined, and so that's why I've named it that.
Oh, well, that's great. I think everybody should be feisty because,
Oh, to a certain extent, if you're too feisty and feisty in a negative sense, then obviously it's maybe not such a good thing. But yeah,
well, it's funny because I had a guy on the show, uh, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and he said that personalities dialed up too much can be interpreted as something else. For example, self confidence dialed up too much can come off as arrogance or narcissism. And he was
yes,
right, so there is a balance. So you're absolutely right. Too feisty is not necessarily a good thing, but a bit of
yeah.
feisty is a good thing.
If it gets in the way of you caring for people and showing that care toward people and being tactful when it's necessary, then I think it's too much. That's my opinion. Yeah.
I agree. Being too self centered is not a good idea either, because
No,
you can end up being perceived as a sociopath if it's too much. Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. So tell us a little about, you told us a little about your background. How did you get started writing? What inspired you to do that?
Um, I've always been good at writing short stories, just even starting from elementary school. The writing specifically of the Victorian poets and novelists fascinated me. And I was very much reading and gobbling up as much as I could from that particular era. But I actually wanted to be a cardiothoracic surgeon initially. So
Oh,
it was a very
wow.
different career path that I had in mind for myself. But at the same time, this love of literature was starting to bubble up inside me. And also, I was really debating having that being in the medical field, but also wanting kids at a young age and starting a family. And I know that many people do it and they balance it well, but it's just not something that I felt convicted about doing both at the same time. And so my love of writing started burgeoning. And then I took a course with the Institute for Children's Literature, which is in Connecticut. And that was by correspondence. And I graduated from that with honors. And then that's when I met my husband. So I actually met him when I was 16. And then we dated for a little bit. And then I got married when I was 18. So it all kind of fell into place at the perfect time because it was right when I had to make a decision whether I was going to go to medical school or not, or if I was going to go into writing. And then I met him, and it all worked out. So that's why I decided to write because we got married and we wanted to start a family right away. And so that's what we've done. And it's something that I can do at home and be with my kids at the same time and be a big part of their life.
You couldn't be doing surgery at home. I don't think that would work out too well, would it?
No, exactly. It's just, I have friends who are in med school or they're doing residency, but it's just a lot of juggling, the type of lifestyle and all the crazy hours that they have to do. And it's just not something that I wanted to do while having young kids. It's definitely a dream of mine that I'm still holding on to because maybe I'll go back to school in my 30s, late 30s. But for now, this is what I have, and I love writing. It's a passion of mine that kind of just bloomed later in my life, but in my teens, yeah.
Okay, so how many books have you written now?
I've written four, and I'm working on my fifth one.
Okay, great. And you said are they all set in the Victorian era?
Well, close. So my first one is the Edwardian era. It was during World War One. It's the Halifax explosion of 1917. And then I wrote a novella sequel. So a novella is kind of half the length of a novel. And I wrote the sequel for that. And my second standalone book in the series is in the Victorian era, but it's in the Canadian West, which is very different from perhaps the Victorian era that you read about in novels that have to do with dukes and duchesses or England. It's just got a little bit of a more wild Western flavor to it.
That's always been a fantasy of mine, is if there was time travel possible, to go
Yes.
back to right at the day that Queen Victoria died and Edward VII took over the throne.
Hmm.
And I thought that would be such an interesting time to live in England.
I
But
agree.
with a caveat that I would need like a case of penicillin, which wasn't invented yet, because the
Exactly.
disease was so, people just died of horrible things back then that we don't even have to think about right now.
That's right. That's it. I would go back with all the modern, necessities
I
that
mean,
that we enjoy
electric was
today.
just coming and telephones were just coming, cars were just coming. So all of that would be neat, but I would want to be healthy. I
Yes,
think, that would be a problem if you needed medical attention.
for sure. A big draw for me is the horse and carriage, and just
Yeah, that would be
going by
fun.
horseback because I love horses. I have a horse actually,
Oh,
and
great.
so that's a wonderful hobby of mine that I really enjoy taking part of. But yeah, the Victorian era was always such a fanciful and just full of courtesy and just structure that we don't see as much today in our modern society.
And great clothes.
Yes, the clothes.
Great clothes.
Exactly.
Amazing. So, do you ride Western or English?
I ride English.
Oh,
I
okay.
can
Because
ride Western, but English is definitely my preference.
I used to have a horse long time ago, many years ago, and I was a Western rider, definitely.
Oh,
Cowboy.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I did get my horse, she was Western trained, but she switched over to English pretty well.
Well, we could have a whole conversation on that, but that's not why you're here. Uh, what is the book that you're promoting now?
So the book is Scathed Bones, and that is the novella sequel to Wisps of Gold. So behind me, I have Wisps of Gold right here. And that is the Canadian West Victorian era. So, which that is set in, it's a murder mystery set during the Caribou Gold Rush of BC. And the Scathed Bones is the sequel to that, which actually features Canada's very legendary, famous serial killer, Agnes McVee, who originally came from Scotland. So that Agnes McVee, I had come across actually in my research for Wisps of Gold, but I knew that I didn't want to touch the original legend because it's so well beloved and known, and I didn't want to touch the original legend, but I definitely wanted to look into kind of her beginnings. But before that, which is the whole story of Scathed Bones, I had to start with my character and, kind of have her develop in a different story. And then at the end of Wisps of Gold, a year and a half later, she comes to Scathed Bones, and this is where we meet the beginnings of Agnes McVee and just kind of my imagining of what that would have looked like.
So, is your character being pursued by Agnes McVee?
Well, she kind of gets thrown into the mystery of Agnes McVee. There's all these disappearances that happen in the West in my character's area because my character was an owner of the 108 Mile Hotel. And the Mile Hotels were just, they were establishments, hotels along the Caribou Road that miners would go to, and they would have a meal there, they would sleep, and then they would just continue on their way to the gold fields. So my character in the first book is the owner of one. She sells it at the end, but she comes back a year and a half later to her family and to her fiance, who is still in that area. And she comes back and finds out that all these people are starting to disappear in the region, and Agnes disappears herself. And Agnes is a friend of her fiance's. And so her fiance has this, feels honor bound to look for her and make sure that she's safe and okay as a friend. And that's when they get pulled into the whole trap of what Agnes has set.
Oh, okay. So is your book out now?
It is. It's only as an ebook, and you can buy it on all the major ebook platforms and yeah, Kindle, Kobo, Nook.
Okay. I don't know the story of, I've never heard of Agnes before.
So Agnes McVee, well, she came from Scotland with her, well, I don't know if she actually was married in Scotland or she got married in Canada. That is not so well known. But she came to Canada, and she was supposedly a very beautiful woman who would, she actually owned the 108 Mile Hotel for a time, and she would lure these minors into her hotel, and she would actually do like kind of like a human trafficking. She would take these young girls and sell them to minors, and she also killed many minors for their gold. That is the legend of Agnes McVee.
Wow. So she was a sort of a madam slash killer, yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. Supposedly she killed 47 minors. She sold 8 girls. She supposedly has a stash of gold that she received from the miners somewhere. They haven't found it, but they have found small little pockets of stashes, but not the huge stash that they think she would have amassed from these kidnappings and murders.
How much gold do they think she got?
That is a good question, which I'm actually not too sure. I know I read it in passing, but I'll have to get back on that.
All right. Well, we do have to kind of wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. It's leahlindeman.com, and I have an Instagram that's at Leah T Lind, so LeahTlind, and the same thing with Twitter.
All right, super. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was
Thank
nice
you so
talking
much
to
for
you.
having me.
And best of luck with your book. Is your book, you said it's only available on ebook now?
That's right.
Is it going to be available in paperback,
As a
hardback at some point?
paperback, yeah, eventually. The whole series, as I said, it's a series. So the first book was a standalone. The second book is a standalone. But the sequel novellas that I'm writing for these standalones are only available as an ebook for now. But once I've finished all 13 books, which each book is set in a different province or territory of Canada during a certain historical time period. So it's 13 books total, which I am working on over the years. It's going to take a while. But once it's all done, I'm going to have a boxed edition with all the ebooks, or sorry, the sequel novellas as paperbacks in the boxed edition.
Well, super. Well, we look
So that might
forward to
be a
that.
while.
Okay. Well, thanks again for coming on. It was nice.